Ambassador Kethvar of the Galactic Coalition stared at the crimson-soaked holographic display with mounting horror. The numbers didn't lie, they never did. 47 star systems had fallen to the Vexhai Empire in the past solar cycle alone. 3 entire battle fleets, representing the combined might of 12 coalition species, had been reduced to expanding clouds of superheated plasma and twisted metal. "Ambassador," whispered Veltar, his Centauran aide, her typically blue skin pale with fear. "The Outer Rim colonies are sending evacuation requests faster than we can process them. The Vexhai aren't just conquering. They're systematically exterminating entire populations." Kethvar's forearms trembled as he manipulated the tactical display, zooming in on sector after sector painted in the ominous red that indicated Vexhai occupation. His species, the Zephyrians, had evolved from peaceful gas giant dwellers. They were natural diplomats, traders, mediators. War was an alien concept that they had learned to understand but never master. "What about the Altarian Defense Corps?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Destroyed at Kepler 442. Their ships are magnificent technological achievements, but they're built for exploration and scientific research. The Altarians themselves." Veltar paused, her voice breaking slightly. "They're too fragile for direct combat. The G-forces from evasive maneuvers alone killed most of their crews before the Vexhai weapons even reached them." Kethvar closed his primary eyes in despair. The Altarians were the Coalition's greatest engineers, capable of building vessels that could traverse galactic distances in mere cycles. But their delicate, crystalline physiology made them unsuited for warfare. The Centaurans had impressive numbers, billions of beings across hundreds of worlds. But their collective consciousness that made them brilliant coordinators also made them vulnerable to the psychological warfare the Vexhai employed. The Rigelian Confederacy had impressive military traditions, but their honor-based combat doctrine was useless against an enemy that viewed mercy as weakness and turned prisoners into biological weapons. Even the mighty Draconians, with their imposing physical presence and natural armor, had been overwhelmed by Vexhai swarm tactics and plasma weaponry that could melt through their scales like butter. "Sir," Veltar's voice carried a note of desperate hope. "There is one possibility. The Xenobiology Department has identified a recently FTL-capable species. They call themselves humans. From a world a species that just achieved faster-than-light travel?" Kethvar's voice cracked with exhaustion. "What could they possibly offer that our combined fleets could not?" Veltar activated a new display showing a blue-green marble of a planet orbiting a yellow star. "Sir, their homeworld classification is unprecedented. Our planetary survey teams rated it as a Class XII death world." The ambassador felt his blood chill. Class XII was theoretical, a planetary classification so hostile that the survey protocols assumed no complex life could evolve there. Class 8 worlds like the Vexhai homeworld were considered the upper limit for supporting advanced civilizations. "Are you absolutely certain of this classification?" "Verified through 3 separate survey expeditions, sir. The planet experiences extreme temperature fluctuations that range from 70 degrees below freezing to 60 degrees above the boiling point of water. Its atmosphere contains reactive oxygen, a gas so corrosive it would kill most coalition species within minutes of exposure. The surface is dominated by predatory creatures with bite forces exceeding our powered exoskeletons, and weather systems that generate energy releases comparable to our orbital bombardment weapons." Veltar paused, her expression mixing awe and terror. "Sir, the most disturbing part is that these conditions aren't anomalous. They're the planet's natural state. And not only have humans survived there for millions of standard cycles, they've developed advanced technology, complex societies, and art while under constant threat of extinction from their own environment." The tactical display showed Vexhai forces advancing on 17 different fronts simultaneously. Soon they would reach the Coalition core worlds, Zephyria Prime, Altarian Central. No negotiations, no requests for additional information, no demands for payment or guarantees. Just matter-of-fact confirmation that they were coming to wage war against an enemy that had crushed every military force in Coalition space. As Kethvar stared at the message, He realized he wasn't sure whether he had just saved the coalition or doomed it to an even worse fate than Vexhai occupation. What kind of beings evolved on a world so hostile that it made the Vexhai homeworld look like a resort colony? He was about to find out. Captain Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the TDF Indomitable, his weathered hands gripping the command rail as he watched the coalition fleet through the main view screen. Their ships were works of art, flowing, elegant curves that seemed to dance through space with an almost organic grace. Beautiful, but Rodriguez had seen enough combat to know that beauty and functionality rarely went hand in hand. "Sir, we're receiving multiple priority hails from the coalition vessels," Communications Officer Blake reported, his voice tight with barely concealed amusement. "They're extremely concerned about our approach vector." Rodriguez glanced at his tactical display and suppressed a grin. The human fleet was approaching the rendezvous point through the Kepler asteroid field, a navigational hazard that the coalition had marked with enough warning beacons to light up a small moon. To most spacefaring species, attempting to navigate through the dense field of tumbling rocks and metallic debris was tantamount to suicide. To humans who had learned to drive in Earth traffic, it was Tuesday. "Tell them we appreciate their concern, but we've got this under control," Rodriguez replied, watching his helmsman thread the Indomitable between two asteroids with barely 3 meters of clearance on either side. "Helm, maintain course and speed. Let's show these folks what Earth-trained pilots can do when they're not worried about scratching the paint." Aboard the coalition flagship Harmony's Dream, Admiral Kethvar watched the human approach with mounting horror. The alien vessels moved through the asteroid field like apex predators hunting through a forest, with absolute confidence and terrifying precision. They didn't avoid the asteroids so much as use them, employing gravitational slingshot maneuvers and using the larger rocks as cover while maintaining perfect formation. "Sir," his tactical officer gasped, his normally steady voice cracking with disbelief. "Their acceleration rates are physically impossible. The G-forces alone should turn their crews into organic paste." Admiral Kethvar studied the human fleet with growing unease. While coalition vessels were designed for speed, efficiency, and minimal resource consumption, the human ships looked like they had been forged in the heart of a dying star. Their hulls were scarred with what appeared to be impact craters, not from battle damage but from design. They had external armor plating thick enough to stop particle beam weapons, and their weapon systems were integrated so seamlessly into the hull that the entire ship could effectively be considered a single massive gun. The human fleet emerged from the asteroid field in perfect formation, not a single vessel lost or even damaged. As they took up positions alongside the coalition ships, the size difference became apparent. The human vessels were smaller, blockier, and decidedly less elegant than their coalition counterparts. They looked primitive by comparison. They also looked absolutely lethal. Coalition Command, this is Captain Rodriguez of the Terran Defense Force. A voice came through the communications array, speaking flawless galactic standard with an accent that somehow made every word sound like a threat. We're here to help with your HFY problem. Please transmit tactical data and current enemy positions. Kethvar activated his communicator with trembling hands. Captain Rodriguez, welcome to the Coalition fleet. We must warn you, the HFY are unlike any enemy you may have encountered. Their technology is advanced. Their tactics are ruthless, and they show no mercy to. Admiral, Rodriguez interrupted, his voice carrying a tone that made every coalition officer on the bridge instinctively step back. With all due respect, we've read your reports. We know exactly what we're dealing with. There was a pause filled with the subtle background hum of human technology, systems that sounded somehow more aggressive than coalition equivalents. You should know something about us, though, Rodriguez continued. We come from a world where literally everything has tried to kill us since day one. Our own planet has been at war with us for 200,000 years. Weather that could vaporize your ships, animals that hunt in packs and use tools, diseases that adapt faster than we can cure them, and natural disasters that make orbital bombardments look like gentle rain. Another human voice came over the channel, younger but equally steady. Sir, long-range sensors are picking up HFY battle groups advancing on the mining colonies in copy that, Lieutenant Hayes. Admiral Kethvar, we're moving to intercept. Suggest your ships maintain a safe distance until we assess HFY capabilities firsthand. Captain, wait, Kethvar began. But the human ships were already accelerating toward the enemy at velocities that should have liquefied their crews. The ambassador watched the tactical display with growing dread. 12 human vessels racing toward a HFY battle group that had already destroyed coalition fleets twice that size. The approaching engagement would either prove that humanity was the salvation the coalition had desperately needed, or demonstrate that even Deathworlders could be destroyed by sufficient firepower. Either way, Kethvar realized, the galaxy was about to witness something unprecedented. The meeting of an unstoppable force and what everyone had assumed was an immovable object. The universe was about to discover which was which. War leader Thrax Zagoth of the HFY Empire observed the approaching human vessels through his flagship's bioorganic sensors. mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among his species. His bridge crew of scaled warriors stirred restlessly, eager for another easy slaughter. 12 pathetically small craft approaching his battle group of 67 warships. These newcomers would provide a few moments of entertainment before the real work of conquest resumed. The Vexhai had perfected warfare across 1,000 conquered worlds. These primitives would learn the price of challenging the apex predators of the galaxy. War leader, his weapons officer hissed through razor-sharp teeth. The unknown vessels ignore our dominance broadcasts. They continue to accelerate directly toward our formation. Foolish, Thrax Zagath growled, his claws flexing in anticipation. Perhaps they lack the intelligence to understand our warnings. Target their lead vessels. Show them why civilizations kneel before the Vexhai Empire. The order rippled through the battle group. Dozens of plasma cannons swiveled to target the approaching humans, weapons that could reduce coalition vessels to superheated gas in seconds. The Vexhai had refined these systems through centuries of conquest, perfecting the art of intimidation through overwhelming firepower. Torrents of plasma erupted from the Vexhai fleet, cascades of stellar fire that had melted through the shields of every opponent they had ever faced. The space between the fleets lit up like a newborn star as enough energy to level a continent struck the human formation. Captain Rodriguez felt the indomitable shudder violently as plasma fire washed over his ship's hull. Alarm klaxons wailed, but his crew remained at their stations with the calm professionalism of warriors who had trained for this moment their entire lives. Damage report. Rodriguez barked, gripping his command chair as another wave of plasma struck. Hull integrity at 84% and holding. Chief Engineer Thompson called back without a trace of panic in his voice. Ablative armor is performing as designed, sir. These plasma bursts would vaporize most ships, but were built to take a beating. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Human ships didn't rely on elegant energy shields that could fail at the worst possible moment. They trusted in layered armor plating designed to absorb and dissipate energy, technology forged by a species that had learned to survive lightning storms, solar radiation, and atmospheric entry without sophisticated protection systems. Outstanding. Weapons return fire. Target their command vessel. The first human salvo struck Thrax Zagatha's flagship like the fist of an angry god. The Vexhai energy shielding, designed to deflect plasma and particle beams, proved utterly useless against solid projectiles traveling at relativistic speeds. The kinetic rounds punched through the shield barriers as if they didn't exist and slammed into the ship's bioorganic hull with devastating effect. Impossible! Thrax Zagath roared as his command deck erupted in sparks and his tactical displays failed around him. Nothing penetrates our shields. Our defenses are perfect. His terrified weapons officer was frantically analyzing sensor data. War leader, they're using kinetic weapons, solid projectiles. Our shields deflect energy, not matter. The human ships moved through space like living nightmares, performing maneuvers that should have crushed their crews into paste. They used the gravity wells of nearby asteroids for slingshot accelerations, executed combat turns that pulled 15 GS, and maintained perfect weapons accuracy while performing evasive maneuvers that made experienced Vexhai pilots nauseous just watching. War leader, his tactical officer reported, voice cracking with terror. Their pilots are sustaining 15 G-forces during those maneuvers. That level of acceleration should kill any biological entity instantly. Then they must be using artificial intelligences, Thrax Zagath decided desperately. No living being could survive such punishment. But through the chaos of battle, human voices could be heard over intercepted communications. Laughing. They were pulling G-forces that would liquefy most life forms while under fire from weapons that could level cities, facing odds of 6-1 against veteran warriors. And they were making jokes. Lieutenant Hayes executed a turn that defied everything the Vexhai knew about combat physics while simultaneously targeting 3 separate enemy vessels. Fox 2 on target Alpha 7. Direct hit. That's what I call a home run. Her wingman's voice crackled over the comm. Nice shooting, Hayes. Think these scaled bastards know they picked a fight with the wrong neighborhood. The laughter that followed chilled Vexhai blood across the entire battle group. Within 28 minutes, The Vex-High formation that had terrorized Coalition space for years was reduced to expanding clouds of debris and frozen atmosphere. Not a single human vessel had been destroyed. Captain Rodriguez opened a channel to the distant Coalition fleet. Admiral Kethvar, this is Captain Rodriguez. Enemy formation neutralized. 0 human casualties. Minor hull damage to 3 vessels. The channel remained silent for nearly a full minute before Kethvar's whispered response. How? By all the stars, how is that possible? Admiral, Rodriguez replied with the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing the weather. You asked for reinforcements. What you got were Deathworlders. We don't just survive impossible conditions. We laugh at them. News of the human victory traveled through Coalition space faster than quantum communications, carried by survivors, witnesses, and the growing network of species who had watched 12 primitive vessels obliterate a Vex-High battle group that had terrorized the galaxy for cycles. On Altarian Prime, Chief Engineer Vexterra sat in her crystalline laboratory, analyzing battle footage for the 137th time. Her delicate, translucent features flickered with patterns of confusion and awe as she studied the tactical displays. It defies every principle of physics and biology we understand, she murmured to her research team, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance typical of her species. Their technology is centuries behind ours in sophistication, crude kinetic weapons, chemical propulsion, metal armor plating. Yet they achieved total victory against forces that reduced our most advanced fleets to molecular vapor. Her assistant, a young Zephyrian engineer named Koltar, highlighted a section of the battle recording. Observe their combat maneuvers here, Chief Engineer. The vessel designated Defiant uses the gravitational field of that asteroid to execute a 180-degree vector change, while maintaining weapons lock on 3 separate targets. The precision is impossible, Vexterra agreed, her crystalline form shimmering with agitation. But examine the biometric readings we managed to intercept. The pilot sustained 17 G-forces during that maneuver. Any Coalition species would be rendered unconscious or dead instantly. Yet the human was not only functional, audio analysis suggests he was singing during the engagement. Across the galaxy on Centauran Command Station, General Hexagon convened an emergency session with his military advisors. The 6-armed Centauran's normally calm demeanor had been replaced by barely controlled amazement. Report, he commanded, his multiple eyes focusing on different tactical displays simultaneously. Sir, we've received confirmation from 23 separate engagements, his intelligence officer announced. Every Vex-High force that has encountered human vessels has been eliminated. Not defeated, eliminated. Complete destruction with minimal human casualties. What are their loss ratios? The general asked, dreading the answer. That's what's remarkable, sir. Across 19 separate battles involving over 300 human vessels, they've reported 14 total casualties. 14 casualties against forces that have slaughtered millions of Coalition personnel. General Hexagon's command chamber fell silent except for the hum of holographic displays. 14? Against the Vex-High. Sir, I've been analyzing their tactical doctrine. They don't fight like any civilized species. They use their ships as weapons themselves, ramming maneuvers at relativistic speeds, weaponizing debris fields, deliberately overloading their own systems to create electromagnetic pulse effects that disable enemy electronics. That's... The general paused, searching for words. Barbaric. And brilliant. But the most disturbing reports came from medical facilities where human personnel had assisted Coalition casualties. Dr. Elizabeth Warner was treating wounded Altarians in a section of the medical ship Mercy that had lost life support after a Vex-High attack. The temperature had dropped to 53 degrees below freezing, the atmosphere was 92% carbon dioxide, and radiation levels would cause cellular breakdown in most species within minutes. Doctor, the injured Altarian engineer wheezed through his breathing apparatus. You should evacuate immediately. These environmental conditions are lethal to biological entities. Dr. Warner continued sealing the Altarian's wounds with steady hands, her breath visible in the freezing air. This is actually pleasant. You should experience a Minnesota winter sometime. Now that's what we call harsh weather. The Altarian stared at her in disbelief. You consider these conditions pleasant? Well, it's a bit chilly, but I've worked emergency trauma during blizzards where the temperature was -40 and the wind could knock you off your feet. At least there's no wind in here, and I don't have to worry about frostbite through my medical suit. Word spread through coalition medical networks. Humans could operate in any environment. They didn't require environmental suits for conditions that would kill other species in minutes. They treated radiation exposure like a minor inconvenience and worked effectively in gravitational fields that would crush most coalition personnel. Chief Psychologist Malverin of the Coalition Science Division spent weeks analyzing human psychological profiles before submitting a report that would become required reading at every military academy in Coalition space. Subject species demonstrates unprecedented resistance to also recommend never, under any circumstances, making these beings angry at us. On distant Rigelian outposts, traders whispered stories of human merchant vessels that traveled through pirate-infested space routes without escorts, their cargo holds protected by crew members who treated armed raiders like minor annoyances. The Draconians, proud warrior poets whose combat traditions stretched back millennia, watched footage of human battles with something approaching religious awe. Their greatest champions, beings who could tear through armored bulkheads with their bare claws, studied human combat techniques like students learning from masters. Within 6 months of first contact, human had become synonymous with impossible across coalition space. They were the species that laughed at physics, ignored environmental hazards, and treated warfare like a recreational activity. The galaxy was beginning to understand that they hadn't just gained powerful allies. They had discovered what apex predators looked like when they decided to be friendly. Deep in the fortress world of Vex High Prime, Supreme War Commander Zethkaler stood before a holographic display that showed the true scope of the disaster. His scaled hide rippled with barely contained fury as he reviewed reports that defied everything the Empire knew about warfare and conquest. "This is unacceptable," he hissed to his assembled war council, his claws leaving gouges in the biometal command table. "We are the apex predators of the galaxy. For 3,000 cycles, no species has resisted our conquest for more than a few rotations. Yet these humans have eliminated 27 battle groups in less than one cycle." The War Council veteran commanders who had personally overseen the extermination of entire civilizations shifted uncomfortably in their exoskeleton armor. Each bore scars from countless battles, yet none had ever faced losses like these. Supreme Commander, Intelligence Coordinator Vexthal reported, his normally steady voice betraying uncertainty, "We have completed our analysis of captured human technology and biological samples. The results are Unprecedented. Explain. Immediately, Vexthal activated a three-dimensional projection of Earth, its blue-green surface rotating slowly in the chamber's crimson light. Their homeworld is designated as a Class XII death world. The surface conditions alone would eliminate 94% of known galactic species within one solar rotation. Many species adapt to harsh environments, Zethkaler growled impatiently. The Krillian ice warriors, the plasma dwellers of Proxima. Supreme Commander, with respect, you do not comprehend the scale. Their atmospheric composition contains 21% reactive oxygen, a gas so corrosive it would dissolve our respiratory systems. Their weather patterns generate energy releases equivalent to our plasma bombardment weapons. Their geological activity regularly reshapes entire continents. The intelligence coordinator paused, his voice dropping to an awed whisper. Supreme Commander, their evolutionary history is not adaptation to harsh conditions. It is 3 million cycles of continuous warfare against impossible odds. Another projection materialized, showing Earth's biosphere in terrifying detail. War Commander Threxmal, veteran of 17 conquered worlds, studied the data with growing unease. What are you suggesting, Coordinator? That we face an entire species of warriors. Worse, War Commander. We face a species that is warfare incarnate. Every human civilian possesses survival instincts that exceed our elite guard training. Their soldiers are forged by conditions that would be considered torture in our military academies. There is more, Vexthal added grimly. We intercepted human communications during the Kepler engagement. They were laughing. Supreme Commander. The War Council fell silent. In Vexhai culture, laughter during combat indicated either complete insanity or absolute certainty of victory. Laughing? Zethkaler's voice carried deadly quiet. While under plasma fire that could vaporize our dreadnoughts. While executing maneuvers that should liquefy biological matter. While facing numerical odds of 8-1 against veteran Vexhai forces. They were making what our translators identify as jokes and engaging in recreational singing. Tactical Coordinator Mexvar accessed battlefield recordings. Supreme Commander, our psychological warfare protocols have achieved zero effectiveness. Fear inducement, intimidation displays, even broadcasting footage of prisoners being consumed alive. None of it affects them. If anything, witnessing our terror tactics appears to increase their combat efficiency. How do we destroy an enemy that cannot be intimidated, cannot be broken, and treats our most devastating weapons as recreational challenges? Zethkaler demanded. The chamber remained silent until Strategy Master Kethvor spoke with the authority of one who had personally designed the conquest of 43 civilizations. Supreme Commander, I have analyzed their tactical patterns across 19 separate engagements. These beings do not fight according to any rational military doctrine. They use their vessels as kinetic weapons, deliberately expose themselves to radiation that would kill us instantly, and coordinate attacks through methods that suggest telepathic communication. Furthermore, he continued, his voice growing more disturbed, they appear to become more effective when facing superior odds. Standard Vexhai doctrine assumes that overwhelming force demoralizes the enemy. Against humans, overwhelming force appears to trigger what can only be described as enhanced combat frenzy. Zethkaler processed this information with mounting dread. The Vexhai Empire had conquered the galaxy through predictable patterns. Supreme Commander, Vexthal reported quietly. There is one final matter. Our deep space reconnaissance has detected massive human fleet movements. They are not merely reinforcing coalition space. They have mobilized their entire civilization for total war. Fleet strength estimates? Current projections suggest 15,000 combat vessels, with industrial production increasing exponentially. Supreme Commander, they have converted their entire planetary infrastructure to military manufacturing in less than 4 rotations. Their production capabilities exceed anything in galactic history. Zethkaler stared at the strategic display showing red indicators spreading across known space like a viral infection. Each indicator represented human forces, forces that laughed at death, thrived under impossible conditions, and treated the galaxy's apex predators as minor obstacles. "What have we awakened?" he whispered, his claws trembling against the command console. For the first time in HFY history, the conquerors had become the prey. Admiral Rebecca Hayes stood in the command center of the TDF Devastator, the newest and most powerful vessel in the Terran Defense Force fleet. The massive dreadnought's bridge hummed with controlled energy as holographic displays showed the positions of 4,000 human ships spread across 23 sectors like a net of steel and determination. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, his voice carrying the crisp professionalism of Earth's finest. "HFY forces are conducting organized retreats from the Proxima, Kepler, and Rigel systems. That marks the 9th major withdrawal this rotation. Admiral, the coalition maintains protocols for prisoner treatment, rules of wartime engagement, Geneva-style conventions." "Ambassador," Admiral Hayes interrupted, her tone carrying an edge that made every coalition officer who heard it instinctively step backward. "Allow me to explain something fundamental about human military philosophy. For 200,000 years on Earth, Kethvar felt a chill run through his nervous system. The humans weren't simply winning the war, they were systematically ensuring that future conflicts would be resolved using human methods, human strategies, and human definitions of acceptable risk. "Sir, there's also this proposal from Terran Command." The aide handed him a data slate. "They want to establish what they call Terran Defense Force Academy installations in every major coalition system." Kethvar read the comprehensive proposal with mounting realization. The humans wanted to train coalition youth in their survival methodologies, their approach to threat assessment, their uncompromising philosophy of conflict resolution. They weren't just eliminating the current threat. They were systematically converting the entire galaxy to their worldview. A worldview forged by 200,000 years of surviving on the most hostile planet in known space. The galaxy was becoming populated by Deathworlders, one graduate at a time. One standard year after humanity's first contact with the Coalition, the galaxy bore no resemblance to the war-torn chaos that had existed before. The transformation was so complete that younger species could barely comprehend the terror that had once gripped civilized space. The HFY Empire no longer existed, not conquered or subjugated, but methodically erased from galactic history. Their homeworld had been converted into a memorial garden, tended by the handful of HFY civilians who had surrendered unconditionally and spent their remaining lives in service to the species their empire had nearly exterminated. Supreme War Commander Zethkaler himself had been offered a choice that became legendary throughout the galaxy: face trial for war crimes before a coalition tribunal, or engage in single combat with a human champion. Believing his centuries of warrior training and bio-enhanced physiology would overcome these deceptively fragile-looking aliens, he had chosen combat. The fight lasted exactly 11 seconds. The human champion, a soft-spoken agricultural engineer named Thomas Martinez who volunteered for the honor, had approached the towering Vex-High warrior with what observers described as polite professionalism, before systematically dismantling 3 millennia of military tradition with techniques that defied conventional understanding of physics and biology. Now, Ambassador Kethvar stood before the Coalition Council chambers, addressing representatives from 947 species about the new reality they all shared. The chamber itself had been rebuilt, expanded to accommodate the growing membership as former slave species and liberated colonies joined the galactic community. The question before us today, Kethvar announced to the assembled delegates, is no longer how to survive existential threats to galactic civilization. The question is how to properly coexist with our guardians. Representative Vexterra of the Altarian Federation, her crystalline features reflecting the chamber's enhanced lighting, raised a delicate appendage. Ambassador, the humans have made no territorial demands, imposed no taxation systems, established no governing colonies within our sovereign space. By what authority do you designate them as guardians rather than allies? Kethvar activated the chamber's holographic display system, showing comprehensive data that had become depressingly familiar to every coalition intelligence agency. Observe the statistical evidence. Piracy throughout coalition space, reduced by 98.7%. Slavery operations, completely eliminated across 412 systems. Interspecies territorial conflicts, resolved or prevented before escalation in every recorded instance. Unauthorized military buildups, detected and neutralized before reaching threatening capability. This transcends traditional alliance structures, he continued. This represents comprehensive galactic stewardship. Representative Thalgor of the Centauran Collective interjected with the harmonious voice characteristic of his species' collective consciousness. But at what cost to galactic independence? These humans have fundamentally altered the balance of power throughout known space. No species can threaten another without facing immediate human intervention. And you consider this problematic? Asked Representative Kexdal of the Rigel Consortium, her scaled features displaying obvious confusion. My people endured 3 centuries of systematic raids by pirate cartels. Now my offspring sleep safely, knowing that predators face extinction rather than prosperity. The concern, Thalgor responded, his multiple voices creating complex harmonics, is that we have exchanged one form of dependency for another. We rely completely on human protection, human mediation, human military supremacy. What becomes of galactic civilization if they decide we are no longer worth protecting? The chamber fell into contemplative silence until a familiar voice spoke from the observer gallery. A human voice that every delegate had learned to recognize and respect. May I address the council's concerns? Captain Rodriguez asked, rising from his position in the diplomatic section. Of course, Captain, Kethvar replied immediately. The council welcomes your perspective. Rodriguez walked to the center of the massive chamber, appearing remarkably small and vulnerable compared to the towering alien representatives surrounding him. Yet every delegate watched him with the respectful attention normally reserved for apex predators. You're afraid of us, he stated with characteristic human directness. That demonstrates wisdom. Fear promotes survival. We learned that fundamental principle during our species' development on Earth. However, you're focusing your fear on the wrong variables. He gestured toward the starfield visible through the chamber's reinforced transparisteel observation ports. You believe we desire to rule you, control your decisions, make you dependent on our protection. That represents the behavior pattern of every previous apex species in galactic history. But you're not thinking like humans. We didn't achieve dominance on Earth by ruling other life forms. We became successful by learning to coexist with everything that was actively trying to kill us. Here's what should actually concern you. The possibility that we'll leave. That we'll return to our little blue world and abandon you to handle the next Vex-High Empire. The next existential threat. The next test of survival that the universe will inevitably provide. The chamber erupted in surprised murmurs and whispered translations as delegates processed this unexpected perspective. Rodriguez waited patiently for silence before continuing. We're not your rulers or your masters. We're your experienced older siblings, teaching you survival techniques in a hostile universe. The Terran Defense Force Academy isn't designed to make you dependent on us. It's structured to ensure you can defend yourselves when the next challenge arrives. Because understand this clearly, it will come. The universe contains countless predators, and the strong survive by protecting the entire pack. Rodriguez smiled, and for the first time since initial contact, the expression was entirely reassuring rather than terrifying. We're teaching you to become apex predators yourselves. Not because we want you to replicate our specific methods, but because the galaxy requires every species to be strong enough to stand united when darkness comes calling again. Representative Vexterra asked quietly, "And if we choose not to accept these lessons?" Rodriguez's expression became serious again. "Then you'll remain prey when the next predator arrives. And we won't always be available to save you." After Rodriguez departed, the Council voted unanimously to expand the Terran Defense Force Academy program to every inhabited system throughout Coalition space. As Kethvar observed the final vote tallies, he realized the humans had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. They had become apex predators not by conquering territory, but by teaching everyone in that territory to become apex predators themselves. The galaxy was becoming increasingly dangerous to anyone who threatened the peace. And somehow that was exactly what it needed to be. Epilogue. 20 years later, when the Andromedans arrived with their massive invasion fleets, they expected to find a galaxy of divided, primitive species ripe for conquest. Instead, they found 2,000 species united under the Coalition banner, trained in human warfare tactics, equipped with hybrid technology that combined human ruthlessness with alien innovation, and led by the graduates of the Terran Defense Force Academy. The Andromedan War lasted exactly 6 months. The survivors were given the same choice the Vexhi had received: surrender and reform, or face the consequences. Most chose wisely. The few who didn't learned why the galaxy now called Earth's children the shepherds, because they protected the flock with the dedication of guardians and the ferocity of wolves. In the end, they hadn't just asked for reinforcements. They had asked for teachers, protectors, and the architects of a new kind of galactic civilization. They had asked for Deathworlders. And the Deathworlders had delivered exactly what the galaxy needed. Not conquest, but evolution. Author's note: this story explores the classic HFY theme of humans as the helpful apex predators of the galaxy. Dangerous to enemies, protective of allies, and dedicated to ensuring that strength serves justice rather than tyranny.